On my birthday morning, I scrolled through Facebook and saw my son holding a cake, but not for me. He stood grinning beside his mother-in-law, candles glowing, the caption beneath the photo reading, "Happy birthday to the most amazing mom in the world." I stared at the screen until the words blurred, the slice of toast in my hand growing cold. It wasn't the first time. Every year it was the same. Flowers delivered across town, restaurant dinners, a dozen photos posted online for her. For me, silence. My phone didn't buzz. My doorbell didn't ring. My name wasn't even mentioned in passing. Do you know what it feels like to become invisible to the very person you built your life around? It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in pieces. Like someone erasing you with the corner of an eraser. Slow, deliberate, until only faint outlines remain. I closed the laptop and sat at my kitchen table, the one where Micah once ate his after-school snacks while telling me about his spelling tests. The same table where I stayed up sewing patches on his jeans when I didn't have money to buy new ones. Every mark on the wood carried a memory. A cup ring from hot cocoa, a scratch from his toy car, the faint burn where I set down a pan too quickly when the phone rang about his college acceptance letter. All those years, all those sacrifices, and here I was, scrolling through pictures of another woman being praised as if she had done it all. I told myself not to cry, but resentment burns differently than sadness. It coils in your chest, heavy, like smoke that has no way out. Angela, his wife, posted the photos. Her words cut deeper than Micah's silence. So blessed to have a mother who raised me to be strong, kind, and loved. Couldn't have asked for better. Strong, kind, loved. Words I thought once belonged to me. I wanted to scream. I was the one who worked double shifts so Micah could join the baseball team. I was the one who went without winter coats so he could have the latest sneakers. I was the one who stayed awake when he was sick, holding cold cloths to his forehead, whispering prayers under my breath. But none of that appears in Facebook captions. None of that earns a brunch invitation. The resentment grew heavier with every memory. I remembered when Micah was 10 and begged me for a science kit he saw on TV. I worked 2 extra shifts at the diner, came home with aching feet, and bought it. He tore the wrapping paper open, squealed with joy, and hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. That hug kept me going through so many hard days. And yet, now, all those sacrifices feel like coins dropped into a bottomless well, never to be acknowledged, never to return. The part that stung most wasn't the forgetting. People forget birthdays. The part that gutted me was the replacing. He hadn't just overlooked me, he had replaced me with Angela's mother. Year after year, she got the spotlight, the flowers, the cake. She got the title of Best Mom. And I was erased. I tapped my phone screen, half hoping there might be a message I missed. But no, the only notification was from the grocery store reminding me about weekly specials. The cruel irony made me laugh out loud. The only celebration I got on my birthday was half-off laundry detergent. I tried to rationalize. Maybe Micah was busy. Maybe he meant to call later. But that little voice inside me, the one I tried to silence, whispered the truth. He hadn't forgotten. He just didn't care enough to remember. That thought hurt more than I wanted to admit. I pushed back from the table and wandered into the living room. The walls held framed photos of Micah at every age. His first steps, his prom night, his college graduation. Each picture was proof of the life I gave him, the foundation I built. And yet, standing there, I felt like a stranger in my own story. Resentment has a strange way of changing how you see the past. For years, I told myself I was proud, that every sacrifice was worth it. But that morning, as I stared at those smiling photos, I wondered if I had mistaken love for duty, sacrifice for devotion. Maybe I had poured everything into him without saving a single drop for myself. The clock ticked loudly, every second marking another moment I sat alone on the day I was born. I thought of the nights I waited for him to come home from parties, the mornings I packed lunches, the afternoons I sat in cold bleachers cheering for him. I thought of the way he used to run to me after school, waving papers and shouting, "Look, Mom!" Now, years later, I scrolled through Angela's posts, watching him beam for someone else's mother. It felt like theft, like someone had stolen not just my son, but the recognition of everything I had done. And the thief wasn't Angela's mother. It wasn't Angela. It was Micah himself, because he handed it all away without hesitation. I tried to eat breakfast, but each bite tasted like ash. I set the plate in the sink, turned on the tap, and stared at the stream of water. I thought about how water wears down stone, drop by drop. That was me, worn down by years of being overlooked. I remembered my last birthday. He had texted, "Hey Mom, sorry, can't make it today, but we'll do something soon." That something never came. And the year before that, he didn't even text. He just said later, "Oh, was it last week? Sorry, lost track of time." I told myself it was fine, that he was busy, that young families had a lot on their plate. But the truth is, if something matters, you don't forget. You don't misplace it like a grocery list. This year was different. It wasn't just forgetting, it was public replacement. His smile in those photos wasn't distracted or guilty. It was joyful, genuine. That smile used to be mine. The longer I stared at the photos, the more the resentment twisted inside me, mixing with shame. How pathetic was I, sitting here, waiting for crumbs of recognition? How many times had I told myself it didn't matter, when it clearly did? I thought of calling him, thought of saying, "Micah, today is my birthday too." But I didn't, because deep down I knew it wouldn't change anything. If he needed reminding, then the love I wanted wasn't real. It would be an obligation, not a choice. And I don't want love that has to be begged for. So I sat in silence, letting the resentment wash over me. I let myself remember every ignored birthday, every missed call, every time Angela's parents were celebrated while I sat alone. Each memory piled on top of the last, building a mountain of bitterness I could no longer pretend wasn't there. For the first time, I admitted to myself that my son didn't see me anymore. Not as a mother, not as a person. I was a shadow in the background of his new life, a name left off the caption, a birthday forgotten. And as much as it hurt, that admission was the first step towards something I couldn't yet name, something beyond waiting, beyond resentment, something that would change everything. That evening, I sat in my quiet kitchen with the lights off. I didn't bother turning them on. The glow from the laptop screen was enough, and maybe I wanted the room dark, like how I felt inside. The house made little noises around me, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft tick of the clock, the creak of the floor settling. All those sounds reminded me of years spent here, waiting for someone else to need me. For decades, this house had been a waiting room, waiting for Micah to come home, waiting for a phone call, waiting for a reason to feel seen. But that night, something shifted. I was tired of waiting. I reached for my phone again, just in case. No missed calls, no text messages, nothing. My son hadn't remembered. He hadn't cared. For years, I told myself he was busy with his family, his job, his responsibilities. I excused the silence by saying, "That's just how life is when kids grow up." But deep down, I knew the truth. He remembered birthdays when they belonged to other people. He remembered dinners and anniversaries when they involved his wife's family. He just didn't remember me. The resentment was sharp that night, but underneath it, another feeling stirred. Resolve. I opened my bank account online. The numbers appeared on the screen. $75,000. That was money from my compensation years ago. I had told myself I wouldn't touch it, that I was saving it for Micah, for his future, for emergencies he might have. That account had become another waiting room, just like this house. Money sitting still, not for me, but for him. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. For the first time, I asked myself, why? Why am I saving for someone who doesn't save space in his life for me? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glowing balance. $75,000, enough to change the rhythm of my days, enough to build a new life if I had the courage. I felt guilt at first. A mother's instinct is to give, to provide, to leave something behind for her child. But guilt turned into anger. Why was I still planning my life around someone who celebrated other mothers while ignoring me? I whispered out loud, "This money is mine." The words sounded strange, like I had borrowed them from someone braver, but the more I said them, the truer they became. I thought about what I wanted, not what Micah wanted, not what Angela wanted. Me. The truth was simple. I wanted peace. I wanted mornings where I didn't wait for a phone to ring. I wanted a place where my presence mattered, even if it was only to myself. On impulse, I opened another tab and typed, "Cottages for sale in Vermont." I don't know why Vermont. Maybe because I had once seen a picture of a lake there in a magazine. The water was calm, surrounded by trees blazing with autumn colors. The idea of living near a lake felt like freedom. Wide, open, quiet. The listings appeared. Small houses with porches, cottages with wood stoves, cabins tucked away under pine trees. My heart started beating faster. I clicked through photos of kitchens with old-fashioned sinks, bedrooms with slanted ceilings, and windows looking out at water that seemed to stretch forever. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of excitement. It wasn't about waiting. It wasn't about sacrificing. It was about possibility. Still, resentment tugged at me. I couldn't help but think about all the birthdays I spent in this very house, cooking dinners Micah barely showed up for. I thought about the Christmas Eve when I stayed up wrapping his presents, only for him to leave the next morning to spend the holiday with Angela's parents. I thought about the way Angela always called her mother for advice, never me. Each memory was like a stone in my pocket, weighing me down. And then I thought, what if I put them down? I closed my eyes and pictured myself unlocking the door of a small cottage. No reminders of neglect, no empty waiting. Just me, a cup of coffee and the sound of water outside. For the first time in my life, the picture in my head wasn't about Micah's happiness, it was about mine. The thought scared me, but it also thrilled me. I spent hours looking at listings. Some were too big, some too expensive. But then I saw it. A modest 2-bedroom cottage near a lake, white shutters, a red door, a little porch with space for a chair. It wasn't perfect, but it looked like a place where I could breathe. I saved the listing and leaned back in my chair. My mind was spinning. I knew what Micah would say if he found out. He would say I was being selfish. He would remind me of all the times he planned to come around, as if intentions were enough. He would tell me that money was supposed to be for him, for his family, for the future. But the future he was talking about didn't have room for me. Every word he had ever said, or didn't say, played in my head like a recording. His, "Oh, sorry, I forgot," when I reminded him of my birthday last year. His, "We'll make it up to you," that never turned into action. Angela's constant talk about her parents being the best role models. Each word left scars. And now, when I thought of that savings account, all I could see was those words piled up, demanding more sacrifices from me. No, not anymore. I shut the laptop and stood up. My knees ached. a reminder of years of long shifts and hard work. But there was strength in me still, enough to start over, enough to stop waiting for crumbs of love from people who didn't see me. I walked through my house slowly, room by room. I looked at the photographs on the walls, the furniture I had kept for decades, the dishes in the cabinets. So much of my life had been about holding on to things for Micah, saving them, preserving them, keeping them for a family that never came back to claim them. The resentment deepened. I thought of the nights I sat by the phone, waiting. The weekends I cleared my schedule, just in case he visited. The paychecks I stretched thin so he wouldn't feel poor, and now he smiled for someone else's mother while I sat in a dark kitchen counting the years I had wasted. That was the turning point. That was the moment I realized I could leave it all behind. I whispered to myself again, stronger this time. This money is mine. My life is mine. And just like that, the idea was planted. I would find a place where I wasn't invisible, a place where I didn't wait for recognition that never came, a place where my love wasn't measured by sacrifice, but by how fully I lived the days I had left. I knew Micah would be angry when he found out, but for once, his anger didn't scare me. What scared me more was the idea of staying the same, sitting in this dark kitchen year after year, waiting for a call that never came. So I made a choice. That night, I began planning my exit from the life I had lived for too long. The first time Micah saw the cottage was not through a visit, not even through an invitation. He saw it on accident, in the background of a photo I had sent to my niece Elodie. She had come to help me paint the door red, and I snapped a picture of her holding the brush, smiling wide. Elodie posted it on her social media, and that's how Micah found out. My phone rang the next day. His name flashed on the screen. My stomach sank. "Mom," he said the moment I answered. No greeting, no softness. "What is this? You bought a house?" "Yes," I said simply. "With what money?" His tone wasn't curiosity. It was accusation. I took a deep breath. "With my money, Micah. The money I saved." There was silence on the line and then a scoff. "Are you serious? That money was supposed to help us, me and Angela. We thought..." And there it was. We thought. Not we asked, not you offered, but we thought. As if my savings had been a piggy bank with his name on it from the start. Resentment surged through me like fire. "You thought wrong," I said, steadying my voice. "Mom, how could you? You know how tight things are for us. Angela's parents help us all the time. And you..." He stopped, his voice sharp with disbelief. "You bought a cottage instead of helping your own family?" I wanted to scream. "Your own family? Hadn't I been family for all these years, working myself to the bone to give him everything? But when it was my turn, when I needed recognition, I became invisible. And now, suddenly, he remembered I was family when it suited him. I almost hung up. But then I thought, no, this conversation had been waiting for years. "Micah," I said quietly, "I have given and given until there was nothing left for me. That money is mine. I chose to use it on myself." His tone sharpened, almost childish. "On yourself? What do you even need it for? You're not struggling. You're not raising kids. You don't have a mortgage. You don't..." The resentment turned heavy, but under it, a sadness deeper than I could bear. His words weren't just selfish. They were dismissive. He saw me as nothing but a resource. And then came the twist I didn't expect. He said, "You don't need a house. You don't need anything. You're just you. Just you." 2 words that broke something inside me. It reminded me of another time, decades ago, when my own father told me, "You'll never amount to much. You're just a girl." I had buried that memory deep, But Micah's words pulled it up like a weed through cracked pavement. It was the same tone, the same dismissal, the same erasure of my worth. I could have yelled then. I could have told him every sleepless night, every double shift, every missed meal I endured so he could have the life he now lived. But I chose not to. I chose silence. Because the truth was clear. If he hadn't seen me all these years, he wouldn't see me now, no matter how loud I shouted. Instead, I said, "Micah, I'm not just me. I'm your mother, and I matter. Maybe not to you, but to myself." And that has to be enough. He grew quiet, then angry. "Angela's going to be furious when she hears about this. She said you'd think of us first. She said you'd never do something this selfish." There it was again. Her name, her voice, her shadow cast over everything. Angela's mother was celebrated. Angela's opinion was gospel. Angela's family was priority. And me? I was the one who was supposed to stay quiet, keep saving, keep sacrificing. I felt the bitterness rise, but I also felt something else. Release. "I'm not here to please Angela," I said calmly. "I'm not here to be a backup plan when her parents can't cover something. I am here, Micah, to live the life I still have." The silence stretched. I could picture his face. Confused. Angry, maybe even a little scared. Because this wasn't the mother he knew. This wasn't the woman who always said yes, who always gave, who always folded herself into the background. Finally, he said, "So that's it? You're just leaving us behind?" I almost laughed at the irony. He had left me behind years ago. Birthday after birthday, holiday after holiday, he chose them over me. I hadn't been part of his us in a long time. But I didn't laugh. I kept my voice steady. "Yes, that's it." The call ended shortly after, his voice sharp with anger, mine calm with finality. A week later, I visited his house one last time to gather a few things I had stored there. Angela met me at the door. Her smile was polite but thin, like plastic stretched too tight. "So," she said, "you've decided to spend it all on yourself." Her words dripped with judgment. Every syllable told me I was selfish, ungrateful, less than her parents. I didn't answer her. I didn't defend myself. What was the point? Micah appeared behind her, his arms crossed. "Mom, we can't believe you'd do this. After everything, you're destroying this family's comfort." That was the moment I realized nothing I said would ever make them see. To them, I was not a person. I was a convenience. I stood tall. Looked him in the eye and said, "No, Micah, I'm not destroying anything. I'm finally stepping out of the role you trapped me in." Then I turned, walked past them, and closed the door behind me. The cool air outside hit my face like a baptism. For years, their words had chained me, convinced me to keep sacrificing, to keep waiting. But walking away from that house, I felt those chains fall. I didn't yell, I didn't argue, I didn't beg to be seen. I chose silence, the kind that speaks louder than anything else. When I reached my car, I looked back once. Through the window, I saw Micah and Angela standing side by side, their faces twisted in anger, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt something close to freedom, because I knew deep in my heart that I had finally broken the cycle. When I first unlocked the door to my cottage, I half expected to feel regret. I thought maybe I'd stand there with the key in my hand and wonder if I'd made a mistake, if I should run back and apologize, if I should try to fix what was broken with Micah. But regret never came. Instead, I stepped inside and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Quiet joy. The cottage was small, nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a little kitchen, a fireplace that looked like it had warmed 100 winters. The floors creaked, the windows rattled when the wind picked up. And the red door stuck a little when I pulled it shut. But it was mine. Not a house filled with memories of neglect. Not a space where I waited for someone who never came. Mine. I set my bag down and just stood there, listening to the silence. It wasn't the heavy silence of being forgotten. It was peaceful. Still, as I unpacked boxes and placed dishes in the cabinets, resentment kept creeping in. Every plate I set down reminded me of family dinners I cooked for Micah, meals he often skipped because he already ate at Angela's parents' house. Every photo I hung reminded me of birthdays ignored, holidays where I sat alone. The shadows of their actions followed me, even here. But here, I had a choice. I could let those shadows darken this cottage, or I could make something new. So I painted. I chose a soft cream for the living room walls, something warm that reflected the morning light. I painted the front door bright red and hung a sign on it that read, "Come in, if you mean it." That sign wasn't for strangers. It was for me. A reminder that my door would only open to honesty, never obligation. One afternoon, as I brushed the last coat of paint on the porch railing, my niece Elodie drove up. She got out of the car carrying a basket of muffins she'd baked herself. "Auntie," she said, smiling so wide it lit up her whole face, "I love what you've done with this place." There was no hidden meaning in her words, no judgment, no expectation that I'd pull out my wallet or write a check, just kindness. That basket of muffins meant more to me than every store-bought cake Micah ever carried into Angela's parents' dining room. We sat at the little kitchen table, the smell of fresh paint still in the air, and talked for hours. She asked me about my plans, about what I wanted to plant in the garden, about whether I liked the lake. She never once mentioned Micah. She never once asked me to explain myself, and that was when I realized how starved I had been for simple sincerity. Later that night, after Elodie left, I walked down to the lake. The water was still, the moon casting a silver path across the surface. I thought about all the times Micah had said things like, "We'll celebrate later," or "You don't need that, Mom. Save it for us." Every word of his had been another reminder that my needs, my time, my existence came second. But here, by the lake, there was no one to tell me I was second. There was no one to dismiss me with. "You're just you." There was only the sound of the water and me, finally free to decide what I deserved. Still, healing isn't instant. As I lay in bed that night, I felt the old resentment pressing in. I remembered Angela's thin smile at the door, the way she said, "So, you've decided to spend it all on yourself." Those words still cut. They carried the same judgment, the same dismissal, as if my worth was tied only to what I gave them. I whispered into the dark. Yes, I did. I spent it on myself. Saying it out loud felt powerful. For years I had swallowed those words, but now they filled the room like a promise. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the cottage windows. I brewed coffee, opened the door, and sat on the porch with a blanket wrapped around me. For the first time in decades, I didn't wait for a call. I didn't check my phone hoping for a message. I just sat and drank my coffee, listening to the birds. And I realized this was what I had been missing all along. Not just peace, but ownership of my own days. In the weeks that followed, I built a life here. I planted herbs in little pots outside the kitchen window. I baked bread for myself, not for anyone else, and filled the house with the smell of yeast and butter. I painted one bedroom yellow, even though Micah once told me yellow was too loud. It didn't matter what he thought anymore. Elodie came often, sometimes with flowers, sometimes just to talk. She told me she admired me for finally choosing myself. Her words softened the resentment I carried. Every time she said, "I'm glad you're happy here," I felt the wound inside me start to heal. But Micah's words lingered too. His accusation, "You're destroying this family's comfort. played in my head like a broken record. I turned it over again and again, thinking about how unfair it was. I had paid for his comfort for decades, his sports, his college, his first apartment. I had stretched myself thin so he could be secure, and yet, the moment I chose myself, I became the villain. The unfairness burned, but instead of crushing me, it fueled me. Every meal I cooked in my new kitchen, I cooked with a quiet sense of victory. Every flower I planted was a statement. I'm not invisible anymore. One evening, Elodie brought her daughter over. The little girl ran through the cottage laughing, her voice echoing off the walls. She didn't stop to ask for gifts, didn't treat me like a bank. She simply hugged me before they left and said, "I like your house." It was such a small thing, but it felt like balm. Children don't lie about things like that. She liked my house because it felt warm, alive, mine. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe maybe I wasn't too late. Maybe I could still build something beautiful with the years I had left. I still resented Micah, yes. I resented every forgotten birthday, every dismissive word, every time he chose another family over me. But resentment no longer ruled me. It was there, but it was smaller now, like a scar instead of an open wound. Because here, in this cottage, with the lake outside my window and Elodie's visits filling my days, I had something stronger than resentment. I had purpose. I didn't realize how much weight I carried until it was gone. One morning, sitting with a mug of coffee on the porch of my cottage, I noticed something strange. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for the phone to ring, not for an apology that would never come, not for Micah to remember my birthday. The silence wasn't heavy. It was healing. The lake spread out in front of me, calm and endless. The mist rose from the water in the early hours, curling upward like a veil lifting. I breathed it in, and for the first time in decades, I felt my lungs fill without the ache of resentment choking me. But that didn't mean the resentment was gone completely. No, it still lingered, like the last traces of smoke after a fire. Every so often, a memory of Micah would rise up, his voice saying, "You don't need anything. You're just you." Angela's words echoing, "So you've decided to spend it all on yourself." Each time it stung. Each time I felt the unfairness of it all. Yet here, surrounded by the quiet of Vermont, I had the space to answer those words differently. Yes, I spent it on myself. Yes, I am just me, and that is enough. I started keeping a small notebook by my bed. Every time an old wound resurfaced, I wrote it down. On one page, Micah forgetting my birthday. On another, Angela saying I'm selfish. At first, the list filled quickly, but the more I wrote, the less power those words held. They were just ink on paper now, not chains around my heart. Still, their voices followed me sometimes. On the rare nights when sleep wouldn't come, I'd hear Micah's accusations in my mind. "You're destroying this family's comfort." And I'd whisper back into the darkness, "No, Micah, you destroyed mine long ago. I'm just reclaiming it." It became a kind of ritual, not to erase the resentment, but to face it, to name it, and then to let it drift away like ripples on the lake. I also began to think about the future in ways I hadn't dared before. For so long, my future had been tied to Micah, saving for him, sacrificing for him, hoping for him. Now, for the first time, I asked myself, what legacy do I want to leave? The answer was clear. I pulled out papers one afternoon and began drafting my will. I decided my cottage, my savings, and what little else I had would go to Elodie and to her daughter. They had shown me something Micah hadn't in years: sincerity. Elodie came not because she wanted anything, but because she cared. Her daughter hugged me not because she was told to, but because she wanted to. That sincerity deserved something lasting. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishing Micah. It was about putting my life in the hands of those who valued it. Still, I couldn't help imagining Micah's reaction if he ever found out. I pictured him shaking his head, saying, "How could you cut me out? I'm your son." And then I pictured myself answering calmly, "I gave you everything already. You just never saw it." Every imagined word, every flashback to his dismissiveness fueled my resolve to keep moving forward. The days in Vermont began to form their own rhythm. Morning coffee on the porch, walks by the lake, evenings by the fireplace with a book. Sometimes Elodie came. Sometimes she didn't. But I was never lonely. Not anymore. One afternoon, I baked a pie, just for myself. The smell of cinnamon filled the cottage, and I laughed out loud at the thought of Micah saying, "Mom, you didn't need to do that. We already have dessert." That had happened years ago, when I showed up with a cake and Angela's family had already prepared something. I remembered the way Angela's mother laughed politely and set mine aside, untouched. That humiliation had burned for years. But now, as I ate a slice of warm pie alone at my own table, I felt none of that shame. This pie was for me, and that was enough. It took months, but the resentment began to soften. It didn't vanish. I don't think it ever will. Some wounds leave marks you carry forever. But I stopped letting those marks define me. Instead, I let them remind me of how far I had come. Every time I thought of Micah's words, "You're just you," I answered back with my life. With the herbs growing outside my window, with the laughter of Elodie's little girl, with the sound of water lapping against the shore at night. Each of these small joys was proof that just me was more than enough. I no longer checked my phone on my birthday. That day came and went without a single text from Micah. And for the first time, it didn't break me. Instead, I lit a candle for myself, baked a small cake, and whispered, "Happy birthday." Not waiting, not hoping, just living. That was the difference now. My life wasn't measured by who remembered me, but by how I chose to remember myself. The peace I found here was simple, but it was hard-earned. And I promised myself I would never trade it back for their approval. As I finalized the papers for my will one crisp fall morning, I felt the weight of my decision. I wasn't leaving behind bitterness. I was leaving behind honesty. My legacy would not be for those who ignored me, but for those who cared. When Elodie came to visit that evening, I told her, "This cottage one day will be yours." Her eyes filled with tears. "Auntie," she said softly, "you don't have to do that." "I know," I told her. "That's why it means something." The resentment that had fueled me for so long was still there, but it no longer hurt. It was just a reminder of why I chose differently this time. Now, when I walk by the lake at sunrise, I don't think about Micah's silence. I think about my own voice. Finally heard. I had spent decades sacrificing, waiting, hoping, and in the end, the freedom I found wasn't in being loved by him. It was in finally choosing to love myself. And that is what I want to leave you with. I realized love isn't something you have to beg for. It isn't something you have to earn by giving everything away. It's something you can choose, starting with yourself. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been told you're just you, I want you to remember this. You are enough. You don't need anyone's permission to live your life fully. And as I sit here, the sun setting over the lake, I know one thing for certain. I'm not afraid to tell the truth anymore, even if it hurts,